The massive screen in Earth's Defense Command Center flickered with an alien face. Its blue-tinted skin and multiple eyes might have once shocked the humans in the room, but after 6 months of war, nothing surprised them anymore. Your species has exactly 72 of your Earth hours to surrender, the alien commander announced, each word precisely measured. Our planetary shield system has never been breached in 10,000 years of warfare. Your continued resistance is pointless. Captain Robert Smith stood at the back of the room, his weathered face illuminated by the harsh light of the display. He watched as various world leaders argued and shouted, their voices mixing into a confused jumble of fear and anger. The aliens had already demonstrated their shield's power by stopping everything Earth had thrown at it. Nuclear weapons, plasma cannons, even the newest quantum torpedoes. We need options, General Williams announced to the room, his voice cutting through the chaos. I want every weapon we have analyzed, every possibility explored. Smith moved to one of the side terminals and began reviewing footage of their previous attacks. The alien shield was beautiful in a terrifying way, a shimmering blue barrier that wrapped around their massive ships like a second skin. Every time Earth's weapons hit it, the shield would pulse with energy, absorbing or deflecting everything thrown at it. Sir, a young analyst called out, I've compiled data from all our attacks. The shield appears to adapt to whatever hits it. It's like it learns and becomes stronger with each attempt. The room fell into a deeper despair. Smith continued watching the footage, frame by frame, his mind racing. Something about the way the shield rippled with each impact caught his attention, but he couldn't quite place it. The command center's door suddenly opened with a hiss. An older man walked in, his steps slow but purposeful. He wore a simple civilian suit, and his gray hair was neatly combed. The security guards moved to stop him, but General Williams held up his hand. Let him through, the general ordered. That's Tom Miller, 30 years Artillery Corps, one of the best ballistics experts we've ever had. Miller walked straight to the main display, his eyes fixed on the image of the alien shield. He stood there for a long moment, hands clasped behind his back, studying the footage that Smith had been reviewing. You're all thinking about this wrong, Miller finally said, his voice quiet but clear. Every weapon you've used is too modern, too complex. The shield adapts because it understands the technology you're using. The room fell silent. Even the world leaders stopped their arguments to listen. What are you suggesting? Smith asked, stepping forward. Miller turned to face the room, a slight smile crossing his face. In the Smithsonian's military collection, there's a preserved German railway gun from World War I, completely mechanical. No electronics, no guidance systems, just steel and powder and physics. He paused, letting his words sink in. When was the last time these aliens faced something that simple? General Williams leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You can't be serious. That's 80-year-old technology. Exactly, Miller replied. And that's why it might work. Their shield is designed to counter energy weapons, smart bombs, guided missiles. But what about a simple piece of metal, moving at extreme velocity, powered by nothing more than chemical propellant? He pointed to the screen. Look at how the shield pulses. It's reading what hits it, analyzing the technology. But what if there's nothing to analyze? Smith felt a spark of hope for the first time in months. It was crazy, absolutely crazy. But that's what they needed. The aliens would expect another high-tech solution, another attempt to overwhelm their shields with advanced weapons. They would never expect Earth to take a step backward to move forward. We have 72 hours, Miller said, his voice firm. Let's show them what primitive technology can do. The Smithsonian's storage facility buzzed with activity as teams of workers carefully removed the massive railway gun from its resting place. Tom Miller walked around the huge weapon, his hand running along its weathered steel barrel. Decades of careful preservation had kept the metal from rusting, but the gun still showed its age in other ways. 71 hours left, Captain Smith said, checking his watch. He stood beside Miller, watching as museum specialists carefully documented every piece they removed. Will it even fire after all these years? Miller nodded slowly. The Germans built these to last. But we're not just going to fire it. We're going to make it shoot harder and farther than it ever has before. Workers had already begun laying new railway tracks outside the facility. Modern lifting equipment, designed for moving spacecraft parts, carefully raised the massive gun onto its original railway mount. The sight drew a small crowd of onlookers, many of them taking pictures of what they thought was just another museum move. "Sir," a young technician ran up to them, holding a tablet. "The aliens are broadcasting again." The tablet showed the same blue-skinned commander from before, but now he was laughing. "We have detected your movement of ancient war machinery. How desperate are you humans to think such primitive tools could affect our defenses? Perhaps we overestimated your intelligence." Miller ignored the broadcast, focusing instead on a team of engineers who were examining the gun's firing mechanism. "Let them laugh," he muttered. "They don't understand what they're looking at." Over the next few hours, the work continued at a frantic pace. Modern metallurgists studied the gun's barrel composition. Chemists analyzed the old propellant formulas, suggesting improvements. Computer models calculated maximum stress tolerances. The ancient weapon was being reborn through a marriage of old and new technology. "Look at this," Smith said, pointing to new data coming in from their orbital sensors. "Their shield frequency changes every time it's hit. That's how it adapts so quickly to our weapons. The computer systems in our modern guns actually work against us. They give the shield something to analyze and counter." Miller smiled. "But this?" He patted the railway gun's massive barrel. "This is just physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. No computers, no energy signatures, nothing fancy. Just raw kinetic energy." A loud clang echoed across the facility as workers fitted the first test shell into the breech. The shell was new, designed and built in the last few hours. On the outside, it looked like any other artillery round. But inside was a dense tungsten core, carefully shaped and weighted. "Ready for the first test fire," an engineer called out. The gun's original firing mechanism had been carefully restored. Miller insisted they keep it as mechanical as possible. No electronic triggers or modern firing systems. Just steel striking steel, like it had 80 years ago. The test shot roared across the desert-proving ground. The shell flew straighter and faster than any round this gun had fired during the war, thanks to modern metallurgy and better propellant. But at its heart, it was still just a piece of metal being thrown by an explosion, exactly as artillery had worked for hundreds of years. "Impact speed exceeding calculations," a technician reported, eyes wide as she stared at her instruments. "The new propellant mixture is performing better than expected." Miller watched the impact footage with satisfaction. Now imagine that hitting their shield. No energy signature to read, no technology to counter. Just pure kinetic force, moving faster than their sensors are designed to track. Smith studied the impact crater. "Will it be enough?" "We're about to find out," Miller replied. He turned to the assembled teams. "We have 50 hours left. I want this gun restored, modified, and ready to fire. Every shot after this needs to be faster and harder than the last." Above them, barely visible in the daytime sky, the alien ships waited. Their shields shimmered occasionally, reminding Earth of their presence. They had no idea that humanity's answer to their ultimate defense wasn't some new technology, but rather a weapon from their past, brought back to life for one final battle. In a hastily assembled research lab near the railway gun site, Dr. Ann Baker stared at her computer screen, running simulation after simulation. Empty coffee cups littered her desk, evidence of 40 straight hours of work. Her eyes widened as the latest results appeared. "Miller," she shouted, her voice carrying across the busy room. "You need to see this." Tom Miller and Captain Smith hurried over. The screen showed a detailed analysis of the alien shield's energy patterns, compiled from thousands of recorded impacts during the war. "Look here," Dr. Baker pointed to a wave pattern. The shield doesn't just block attacks. It pulses, like a heartbeat. And like a heartbeat, there's a tiny moment between beats where it's vulnerable. Miller leaned closer. How tiny are we talking about? 1,000th of a second, she replied. Maybe less. Every modern weapon we have is too smart. It detects the shield and tries to adjust its impact timing. But by the time it adjusts, the shield has already adapted. Smith frowned. But our railway gun? Exactly, Dr. Baker smiled. It's too dumb to know it should wait. It just hits with brute force at whatever speed we give it. If we time the shot right, we might catch the shield between pulses. The three of them walked out to where the massive gun waited under the hot sun. Teams of engineers were installing new stabilizers, ensuring the barrel could handle the increased pressure from their modified propellant. 40 hours left, Smith noted, checking his watch. A loud rumbling drew their attention skyward. Through gaps in the clouds, they could see new alien ships arriving, joining the blockade above Earth. Each one activated its shield, adding to the shimmering barrier that threatened their world. They're gathering to watch us fail, Smith said bitterly. Miller shook his head. They're gathering to learn a lesson about underestimating humans. He turned to Dr. Baker. How do we time the shot to hit between shield pulses? She pulled out a tablet, showing a complex series of calculations. The shield pulses exactly 700 times per minute. Never changes. They're so confident in their technology that they don't even vary the pattern. We've calculated the exact speed our shell needs to travel to hit during the gap. A young engineer ran up to them, holding a newly machined shell. Latest design. Sir, pure tungsten core, specially shaped to maintain stability at the new velocity we're planning. The machine shop has been working round the clock to make these. Miller took the shell, feeling its weight. It looked simple, just a pointed piece of metal wrapped in a casing. But inside that simple shape was humanity's best hope. Let's test it, he ordered. The loading crew moved with practiced efficiency, sliding the massive shell into the breech. The gun's original firing mechanism had been polished to perfection, each part moving smoothly as they prepared to fire. Clear the range, Smith called out. The test shot was deafening. The shell broke the sound barrier instantly, creating a sonic boom that rattled windows for miles. Downrange, their sensors tracked its speed and stability. Mach 7, Dr. Baker reported, reading the data. Faster than anything this gun was ever designed to fire. The new propellant mixture is performing perfectly. Miller studied the impact site through binoculars. The shell had punched through their test materials like they weren't even there. Will it be fast enough to hit between shield pulses? According to our calculations, yes, Dr. Baker nodded. But we'll only get one shot. The aliens will realize what we're doing and change their pulse pattern immediately after our first attempt. Smith looked up at the alien ships again. One shot is all we need. They think we've given up, that we're just putting on a show with antique weapons. Their arrogance is going to be their downfall. 39 hours, Miller announced. Let's make every minute count. We need to calculate the exact firing angle, accounting for Earth's rotation, atmospheric conditions, and the ship's positions. He patted the gun's massive barrel. Time to remind the galaxy that sometimes the oldest solutions are the best ones. High above Earth, an alien spy drone silently recorded the humans' activities. In his command ship, the blue-skinned commander watched the feed with growing amusement. Look at them, he said to his officers, gesturing at the images of humans scrambling around their ancient weapon, using explosives and metal tubes like primitive cave dwellers. Perhaps we should preserve this footage for the galaxy's entertainment networks. His officers laughed, their multiple eyes blinking in sync. None of them noticed a small detail in the footage, the precise calculations being made, the careful measurements, the determined looks on the humans' faces. Back on Earth, Miller walked through the busy command center they'd set up near the railway gun. 20 screens showed different data streams, weather patterns, atmospheric conditions, orbital calculations, And shield analysis. 30 hours remaining, Captain Smith announced, updating the countdown display. Dr. Baker rushed in, clutching the new set of printouts. "We have a problem," she said, spreading the papers across a table. "The alien ships aren't perfectly stationary. They're drifting slightly in orbit, moving a few meters every hour." Miller studied the data. "Can we adjust for the movement?" "Maybe," she replied. "But we'll need more computing power. And someone who really understands orbital mechanics." As if on cue, a young woman stepped forward from one of the computer stations. "I can help with that," she said. "I'm Kate Wilson. Before the war, I calculated landing trajectories for Mars missions." Miller nodded. "Show me what you can do." Kate pulled up a complex simulation on her screen. "Look here, the ships follow a pattern. They're using minimal power to maintain position, probably to keep their shields at full strength. But that means they're partially following Earth's natural orbital mechanics." She typed rapidly, adding new variables to their firing calculations. "If we time it right, we can predict exactly where each ship will be at any given moment. Their overconfidence is actually making them predictable." Outside, teams continued working on the railway gun. They'd reinforced the barrel with new metal alloys, carefully maintaining the original design, while strengthening it for the incredible pressures it would soon face. Each component was tested and retested, no detail too small to verify. "Test firing in 5 minutes," Smith's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. Miller watched as they loaded another practice shell. These test shots were using up valuable time and resources, but they couldn't risk the real attempt failing because of some small oversight. The gun roared to life, sending its payload screaming into the desert. Kate tracked the shell's path with their most sensitive instruments, comparing it to her orbital calculations. "Perfect trajectory," she reported. "If this had been aimed at the ships, it would have intercepted their orbital path exactly where we predicted." Dr. Baker checked her shield analysis. "Now we just need to sync the timing with the shield pulses. Kate, can you combine your orbital data with my pulse calculations?" The two women worked together, merging their findings into a single firing solution. Lines of numbers flew across their screens as computers processed the combined variables. Miller walked outside again, looking up at the sky. The alien ships were visible even in daylight now, their shields creating a faint aurora in the upper atmosphere. Their arrogance was almost tangible. They weren't even trying to hide or take defensive positions. A junior technician approached him nervously. "Sir, we're picking up transmissions between the alien ships. They're taking bets on how our weapon will fail." Miller smiled. "Let them bet. Humanity has always advanced by building on its past, not abandoning it. Those ships up there, they're so focused on their advanced technology that they've forgotten the fundamental physics that make it all work." 29 hours, Smith called out, updating the countdown. Kate emerged from the command center, her face showing a mix of excitement and anxiety. "We've finished the calculations. I know exactly where to aim, exactly when to fire, and exactly how fast the shell needs to move." Miller looked at the massive gun, its barrel pointing at the sky like an accusing finger. "Then let's give our audience what they're not expecting. A lesson in human ingenuity." The sun rose on humanity's last chance. 10 hours remained until the aliens' deadline, but Miller had insisted they make their attempt with time to spare. "If we fail," he'd said, "we'll want those extra hours to try something else." The railway gun stood ready, its massive barrel gleaming in the morning light. They'd cleared everything within a mile of the firing position. The force of the shot would shatter windows and shake buildings at even that distance. "Final checklist," Captain Smith called out, his voice steady despite the pressure. "Weather station. High-altitude winds logged and compensated for," came the response. "Orbital tracking." Kate looked up from her station. All ships' positions confirmed and movement patterns locked in. "Primary target is the command vessel. Their shield generator synchronizes all the others." Shield analysis. Dr. Baker nodded without looking away from her screens. Pulse timing mapped and matched to firing sequence. We'll get the gap between pulses 14.38 seconds after launch. Miller walked along the railway tracks, making one final inspection of their weapon. The barrel had been cooled to exactly the right temperature, the rails carefully leveled and secured. Everything had to be perfect. "Sir," a young radar operator called out, "the alien ships are moving." Everyone froze. On the main screen, they watched as the alien fleet began a complex maneuver, ships shifting positions like dancers in a cosmic ballet. "They're forming a viewing gallery," Kate realized, quickly adjusting her calculations. "They're actually arranging themselves to get a better view of our attempt." The alien commander's voice boomed from their communication system. "We have decided to give your species one last chance to demonstrate its capabilities." His tone dripped with mockery. "Please, show us what your ancient technology can do. The galaxy is watching." Miller turned to Kate. "Can you still make the shot?" She typed furiously, running new numbers. Yes. Actually, they've made it easier. They've moved the command ship to a more predictable position, probably trying to give everyone a better view of their invincible shield. 6 hours, Smith announced. The loading crew moved forward with the actual combat round. Unlike the test shells, this one had been machined to perfection, its tungsten core polished to remove even microscopic imperfections that might affect its flight. Dr. Baker ran another shield scan. Pulse timing confirmed. "Their overconfidence is actually helping us. They're keeping their shield frequency absolutely steady, probably to put on a good show." Miller watched as they carefully loaded the shell into the breech. Every movement was precise, practiced hundreds of times over the past 2 days. The massive breech block closed with a solid clang. 5 hours, Smith updated. Kate made a final adjustment to the gun's elevation. Angle set to 82.7 degrees. That gives us the perfect intersection with their orbital path, accounting for Earth's rotation and atmospheric friction. 4 hours, Smith called out. Dr. Baker initialized the firing sequence. They'd stripped out all modern electronics from the firing mechanism, leaving only a simple mechanical timer. Nothing that could be detected or interfered with. 3 hours. Miller stood by the firing controls, his hand steady. Around him, humanity held its breath. In cities across the world, people gathered around screens to watch. Some prayed, some held each other, some just watched in silence. 2 hours. The alien ships hung in the sky like brilliant stars, their shields shimmering with barely contained power. They had no idea they were watching their own vulnerability on display. 1 hour. Miller looked at his team. Kate, her hands finally still on her keyboard. Dr. Baker, watching the shield pulses with unwavering focus. Smith, standing tall despite the weight of humanity's future on his shoulders. "Ready to fire on your command," Miller said quietly. The moment of truth had arrived. Centuries of human warfare, decades of scientific advancement, and days of desperate work all came down to this single shot. "Fire in 60 seconds, Miller announced, his hand resting on the firing mechanism. The alien commander's voice echoed one last time through their communications. "We will make sure your primitive attempt is recorded in detail. Future generations should know the price of such foolish resistance." Kate checked her orbital tracking data one final time. Target holding position perfectly. They're actually keeping their command ship steadier than before. They want everyone to have a clean view. 40 seconds, Miller counted. Dr. Baker watched her shield analysis screens intently. Pulse timing locked. "The gap will occur exactly when we predicted." 30 seconds. Around the world, crowds gathered in streets and squares. All eyes turned toward the sky. The alien ships glowed against the blue background, their shields creating rainbow patterns in the air. 20 seconds. Smith stood at attention, his back straight, watching the massive gun's barrel pointing accusingly at the heavens. Everything they knew about physics, about ballistics, about the fundamental forces of nature, had gone into this moment. 10 seconds. The alien ship's sensors were focused on the gun now, their advanced systems trying to analyze and predict what kind of energy weapon the humans had disguised in this primitive shell. 5. Kate held her breath. 4. Dr. Baker's fingers hovered over her keyboard. 3. Smith closed his eyes. 2. Miller's hand tightened on the firing mechanism. 1. The world seemed to pause for a heartbeat. Fire. The railway gun roared to life with a sound like a small nuclear explosion. The shockwave flattened the desert sand for miles around. The barrel glowed bright orange from the incredible forces contained within it. The recoil sent the massive gun sliding backward along its reinforced tracks, special brakes screaming as they fought to control the movement. The shell broke the sound barrier before it was fully clear of the barrel. The sonic boom shattered windows 50 miles away. It climbed into the sky at 7 times the speed of sound, a simple piece of shaped metal carrying humanity's hopes with it. In his command ship, the alien commander watched his sensors with amusement that slowly turned to confusion. "Where is the energy signature?" he demanded. "Where are the guidance systems?" The shell reached the upper atmosphere, its specially designed shape maintaining perfect stability. At this speed, the air around it turned to plasma, making it glow like a small sun. "Impact in 5 seconds," Kate announced, her voice tense. The alien commander's confusion turned to concern. His sensors were showing nothing but a solid object moving at incredible speed. No energy readings, no electronic signatures, nothing his shield was designed to analyze and counter. "Impact in 3 seconds." The shell crossed the final distance, aimed at a point in space that had been calculated down to the millimeter. "Impact in 1 second." Time seemed to slow down. The shell, glowing white-hot from atmospheric friction, reached the exact point in space where Kate's orbital calculations met Dr. Baker's shield pulse timing. For 1,000th of a second, the shield's energy pattern shifted, creating a microscopic gap in its supposedly impenetrable defense. In that precise moment, 37 kilograms of tungsten, traveling at over 5,000 meters per second, struck the shield exactly between its energy pulses. There was no explosion, no flash of light, no dramatic special effects. Just physics. Pure, simple, unchangeable physics. The shield rippled like a soap bubble being popped. Energy cascaded outward in beautiful fractal patterns. For a moment, it looked like the northern lights had appeared in broad daylight. Then, with a sound that seemed to shake the very fabric of space, the shield shattered. The alien commander stared in disbelief as his sensors screamed warnings. The impossible had happened. Their invincible defense had fallen to a simple piece of metal, thrown very, very hard. Down on Earth, in the command center, no one moved. No one spoke. They all stared at their screens, watching as the greatest defensive system in the galaxy crumbled before simple human ingenuity. Miller finally broke the silence. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the old ways are the best ways." The alien command ship hung in space, naked and vulnerable without its shield. Pieces of the shattered energy barrier drifted like glowing snow, slowly fading away. One by one, the shields on all other ships flickered and died, their synchronization with the command ship broken. "Impossible," the alien commander whispered, all 4 of his eyes wide with shock. "Our shields were perfect. They could stop any weapon." "Any modern weapon," his science officer corrected, reviewing the data. We never thought they would use something so basic. There was nothing for the shield to analyze, nothing to adapt to. Just raw kinetic force, perfectly timed. On Earth, celebrations erupted across every continent. Crowds filled the streets, cheering and hugging complete strangers. Humanity had done what the galaxy thought impossible, armed with nothing more than old technology and determination. At the railway gun site, Miller walked along the barrel, placing his hand on the still warm metal. The massive weapon had slid back nearly 50 meters on its tracks from the recoil, but it had held together perfectly. Like the humans who built it, It had proven stronger than anyone expected. "Message from the alien fleet," Smith announced, reading from his tablet. They're requesting to open diplomatic channels." He looked up with a smile. Their exact words are, "We wish to discuss terms with the species that proved simple physics can defeat advanced technology." Kate and Dr. Baker hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. Their calculations had been perfect, their timing exact. Humanity had shown that understanding fundamental principles could trump even the most advanced alien science. "Multiple ships are dropping into orbit," a radar operator reported. "They're not alien vessels. They're observers from other species. Word is spreading across the galaxy." Miller wasn't surprised. In one shot, Earth had proven itself to be far more than just another primitive world. They had demonstrated something that would change galactic warfare forever. Sometimes the simplest solution was the best solution. The alien commander's image appeared on their main screen again, but this time his arrogance was gone. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "We acknowledge your victory. In 3,000 years of war, no one has ever breached our shields. We never imagined." He looked down at something off-screen. "We never imagined the answer would be so simple." "That's humanity's greatest strength," Miller replied. "We remember our past. We build on it. Every piece of technology, no matter how advanced, still has to follow the basic laws of physics." In the days that followed, the story spread across the galaxy. The primitive humans who had shattered the unbreakable shield, the species that had looked backward to move forward. Earth became known not as a backwater world, but as a place where innovation meant understanding fundamentals, not just creating complexity. The railway gun was moved to a place of honor outside the new Earth Defense Headquarters. Besides it, they placed a simple tungsten shell, mounted upright like an obelisk. The plaque beneath it read, "Sometimes the oldest solutions are the best solutions." Tom Miller retired a week later, but not before receiving honors from every nation on Earth. When asked what he would do next, he smiled and said he was going to teach physics to children. "They need to understand," he explained, "that all the advanced technology in the universe still has to follow basic principles." Kate and Dr. Baker were appointed to lead Earth's new Defense Research Division, with a focus on combining historical knowledge with modern innovation. Their first project was studying how other obsolete weapons might be adapted to counter alien technology. Captain Smith stood at the Railway Gun Memorial one evening, watching the sunset. Above him, the alien ships were barely visible, their shields conspicuously absent. Earth had earned its place among the stars not through superior technology, but through the simple understanding that sometimes the best way to solve a problem was to strip it down to its basic principles. And somewhere in the galaxy, weapons designers were learning a valuable lesson. Never assume that primitive means powerless.